I'm going to close Tracker because I don't really need it from this point forward, but I want to talk a little bit more about what's going on in my locked down file. For example, at this point, if a user attempts to add a document to the lockdown file, and I've got some documents available to me right here, they can drag and drop a document into the document manager. But if they drop it into a folder that's been locked, what's going to happen is they're going to get the message that says the file is locked down and please provide an explanation for these changes. New document was required. Of course, for those of you who do deal with lockdown in your practices, you likely have much more stringent rules as to the explanation that needs to be documented. I'm going to keep it simple today and just click OK. Now, this particular document is not locked down, and if I click on the lockdown checkbox, nothing happens. If I go into the properties of the document, I do have the ability here to lock this document down, but before I do so, I want to check the history, and it just says document link was dropped into the file. On the General tab, if I choose Lockdown here, it tells me that the file will be permanently locked. I'm going to click OK, and we see the padlock show up on that document, and it turns gray, and the check mark shows up in the Lockdown column. Going back into the properties of this newly locked down document, on the History tab, we now see Document Lockdown History item, as well as a milestone that we can view to see what that document looked like at that point in time. I'm going to click OK here. If I want to delete a lockdown document, I can go to the Edit menu and choose Delete, but nothing happens because the document's locked down. Pressing the Delete key or any of the other methods that you would normally delete a document by, nothing will happen because you cannot delete a locked down document. Now let's move into our tax folder for a moment. And I'm going to grab a document. It doesn't matter what document it is, so I'll just grab an email item and bring it into the tax folder here. Now notice when I dropped it into the tax folder, it did not require me to provide an explanation, and that's because the tax folder's properties explicitly state an explanation is not required when adding documents after lockdown. Now the documents that are not locked down can be deleted. So keep that in mind, and we can add as much documentation as we need to into the tax folder in the event that we need to support tax information. Now another area to consider in a lockdown file is the adjusting entries, because once again, the audit team might be finished with the file, but it may be past the lockdown date before the tax team is able to acquire the file from the audit team and do the tax work. So if I'm in the adjusting entries and I click New, it automatically comes up Tax Federal. Now if I was part of the audit team and I tried to change it back to normal, it would tell me that I cannot change the adjustment type because the file is locked down. So that leaves me entering tax adjustments only. So I can say, well, I've got a factual tax adjustment, and it's going to the actual balances. Actually, what I want to do is I want to post that to my tax export codes because this is for life insurance. And I'll go with the top level entity, and my life insurance account, well, that happens to be a Canadian file. No, this is a US file. So I'm looking for 26I, which is my insurance account, but there's an M1 account in the US that is going to be my offset for my life insurance, and that's M105.E. Now select that, and I'm just going to throw in a number of 630 in here and offset that to the 26I that we saw moments ago. I do not wish to add that code. I wish to enter it properly, and in it comes just like that. So I do have the ability to do tax adjustments. And for our U.S. clients, that's a big deal in case we're working papers. For our Canadian clients, many of you will export to your tax software and perform the adjustments directly in the tax software. Now back in my document manager, I do have a tax reconciliation document, and if I scroll down to the bottom, we're going to see the lines for actually 26I up here. There's my life insurance adjustment that I just posted, and if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, the summary where I see my M105 adjustments, the one for life insurance in particular, and the summary for my net income adjustment and my M1 adjustment there. So that can still be done when we're in the locked down file. Now let's say there's some subsequent events that occurred post-lockdown that need to be addressed. Well, if the user has the lockdown password, they can go to the engagement menu and choose unlock. And they would have to enter the password and click OK. Now the file has been locked. Please provide an explanation for these changes. Subsequent event. And I can choose to keep the file unlocked until I relock it. And I'll click OK. Now at this point, notice how everything becomes active again, so anything I do is available to me once again. Let's assume for a moment that I did not need this document 3T that was previously locked down. I could try then to right-click and delete it, but look at that. I can't delete it because it is still a locked down document. We can, of course, add documents, and now that I have the file in an unlocked state, I once again have to add an explanation. So what is it that unlocking the file just did for me? Well, what it really did was back in the adjusting entries, I can now create a new adjustment for a normal entry. So if I needed to post a normal entry to my accounts, I would have the ability to do so. And of course, once I'm finished, I would then want to go back to engagement and choose relock to reapply the lock in the file. Now, while I was doing all that, my history events were being tracked. When I ran cleanup, it cleaned up my history items, then I did a number of other things, ran the lockdown, and then I have my post-lockdown actions being tracked as well. Now, rather than keep track of all the other stuff pre-lockdown and lockdown, what I did was I created a second history document in the document manager that only shows me my post-lockdown events. So I want to know what's going on in the file after lockdown and whether the appropriate explanations have been applied, spell checking perhaps, so forth. And we can see who did it, when they did it, start and end time is all recorded here for us.